Awesome. Awesome. All right. So where we're going to pick up the study today is in the chapter The Doctor's Opinion. And we're going to be on page XXV. So again, XXV, The Doctor's Opinion. And this is actually like an incredibly exciting place to pick up in the Big Book study, because we're really diving into the nuts and bolts and meat and potatoes, as it were, of step one. And so it's just exciting for anyone that's joining today. We're going to dive right into step one. We're going to do a little bit of history. We're going to do some review. And I'm biased. I'm going to have fun. I hope you guys do too. It's so lovely you guys are all here. So let's kick it off. Doctor's Opinion, XXV. So the Doctor's Opinion is, it's composed of, Rob and I were just talking about this beforehand. I always describe it as two letters that were written by Dr. William D. Silkworth. The second one might not be so much a letter, but the nuances of that are going to be a little difficult to describe as we kick it off in this moment. So essentially, two statements written by Dr. Silkworth. And who is this Dr. Silkworth guy? Well, Dr. Silkworth, he worked at a place called the Towns Hospital in New York City. And this was essentially, I'm going to simplify it, like a rehab that specialized only in alcoholism and drug addiction. And in Dr. Silkworth's career, it's reported he worked with something like 50,000 different alcoholics and different drug addicts. So that's why we care about what his opinion is. So let's dive into it and see what's his opinion. So the Doctor's Opinion. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. I don't know about you guys, but when I got here, I kind of was a little, I had a bit of an issue. I'm sure no one can relate with authority. And maybe I've had to, put doctors on some inventory. And I was like, I don't care what doctors think. But I've since changed my mind and grown from there. But it's that idea of a lot of times when we come to, 12-step rooms and 12-step fellowships, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I don't know what I'm struggling with. And often there's a sort of kind of yearning to somebody who might have some answers. And Dr. Silkworth is a gentleman who is going to have a deep understanding of what our problem is. And that's what we're going to lens right into today. So it says, convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have had experience with the suffering of our members and have witnessed our return to health. And I talk about this a lot, that the Big Book is a book of experience. It's not about here's what I think you should do. It's a book of here's what I have done. And Dr. Silkworth, we're going to see that he was right in the trenches with the illness of alcoholism. And his opinion, his ideas, his theories come from experience. And it says, a well-known doctor. That's our guy, Dr. Silkworth. So if you don't have it written in your book and you're writing in your book today, it's always fun to write in your book. I'd encourage you to do it. You can make a note. Heck yeah. To write Dr. Silkworth. And then it says chief physician. Again, the chief physician would be the top doctor, the head doctor, kind of the boss at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction. And so this nationally prominent hospital was the Towns Hospital in New York City. And it was just outside of Central Park. And Central Park back in the day, it had a lot of homelessness, a lot of, people that were struggling with alcoholism and addiction. And it was really like a hotbed of people that were looking for recovery. And so it's kind of like, hey, why are we saying that this guy's the top doctor? Why are we pointing out that was what this hospital specialized in? And what we're doing is what's known as an appeal to authority. I always like to make the joke that Dr. Silkworth, he was not a dermatologist that saw his aunt get a little too tipsy, you know what I mean, and had some opinions. No, he was a guy that worked hands-on and supervised the treatment of 50,000 alcoholics and drug addicts. So his opinion, his theories about what is wrong with us, again, is based out of experience. So he gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. And it says, to whom it may concern. I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. Again, this is what, Dr. Silkworth, Rob can correct me if I'm wrong. He was a neurologist for a number of years, but had some financial issues and had to kind of take a job working with alcoholics, poor guy, and then had a real love for people like us and developed a real passion for people like us. So again, he is a specialist in this illness. And it says in late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. Hopeless, yeah. And that's a theme that we're going to see throughout this book. So if you're underlining, if you're highlighting, well, yeah, it's fine. Your book gets colorful. You can underline or highlight hopeless. But also, it's one of those things, when I got here, I'm like, who the heck is he talking about? Why do we care that he's a competent businessman? Well, who we're talking about is Bill Wilson. So again, if you're writing in your book, you can make a little note that we're talking about Bill Wilson. And, oh, yeah. So if you're wondering, you can, in the chat, you can get information about, Silky and that handsome fellow, what he looked like. You can see kind of the Charlestown's hospital. And yeah, it turns out that Silkworth lost all his money in the 1929 downturn. So had to deal with people like us, which thank God for that. You know what I mean? And actually, I didn't plan on going on this tangent, but throughout this book, one of the things that we see consistently is us not getting what we want and instead getting what we need. And a spiritual awakening. Dr. Silkworth didn't need a spiritual awakening, but for somebody like me who does, a spiritual awakening almost always beginning with me not getting what I want. So he didn't get what he wanted. He had to settle for dealing with people like us. But what we're talking about in that paragraph is Bill Wilson, and why it's saying, hey, he was a competent businessman of good earning capacity. I believe what he's trying to do there is punch through some of the denial that I know that I had. An alcoholic is got to be somebody that looks like this or somebody that looks like that. And he's saying, no, this is a human being who at one point in his life was a competent businessman who was able to bring in money, but still was an alcoholic who was hopeless. All those things that I might try to put between me and the diagnosis of alcoholism or addiction or whatever brings you to the study. I can still have certain things holding on together, but that does not mean I don't have this illness. And so it says, in the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. And in that small little sentence, we're gonna unpack that. It's gonna be a whole lot to unpack. So for those that have been coming, stick with us. We're gonna do some review. And for those that are new to this study, hang on. We're gonna do some review. We're gonna do some history. It's delightful. It's fun. I made a picture. So when we talk about this here, let me see if I can zoom in a little. So what happened? I'm going to start at the bottom here. So Bill Wilson, it says in the course of his third treatment. So Bill Wilson, our intrepid hero of this book, he goes to the town's hospital for the first time in the summer of 1933. And he meets Dr. William D. Silkworth. He meets the doctor who has written this letter. And Dr. Silkworth explains what his problem is. He explains that, Bill, you have a physical allergy, that once you start to drink, you cannot control the amount that you take. You drink and you have this thing in you, this phenomenon of craving. And we're going to talk about that today, where you need more. And the more that you drink, the more that you need to drink, and you have absolutely no control. And he says, and Bill, you also, unfortunately, seem to be an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. And what that means is you've got this mental obsession. So when you are sober, as you are today, you get this thought that tells you that you can go back to drinking, even though it's destroying your life. And Bill Wilson says, awesome. Thanks, doctor. I've got that information. I got a mental obsession and a physical allergy. And that mental obsession, we're going to really open up to that spiritual malady, probably a little more next week, and definitely a lot more in steps 2 and step 3 and step 4. But we can see that, like, at the root of that, there's something where I'm sober and I don't feel right. I don't feel well. So Bill Wilson, he's like, awesome, great, so happy to hear it. I've got self-knowledge. I'm going to stay sober on that. Ain't no thing. So he drinks again. And then about a year later, he goes back to the hospital. And when he's in the hospital, he learns that he's going to die of alcoholism. And he learns the hopeless nature of his illness. So that happened in his first 2 hospitalizations. And meanwhile, there's a gentleman. This is a handsome fella. I always describe them as handsome or delightful or things like that. AA history, Tinder, which way you swipe it? I'm joking. But we have this guy, his name is Roland Hazard, and you can kind of read his story on page 26. Roland Hazard, he comes from an incredibly wealthy family, and he's got money for days, and he's a successful guy, but goodness gracious, he can't stay sober. And he's trying everything he can try to stay sober, and nothing works. And he goes all the way to Europe, and he goes and he meets with Dr. Carl Jung, and he works intensively one-on-one with Carl Jung for a year. And he also thinks, hey, that's great. I got self-knowledge. Ain't no thing. I got it. And then he drinks again, too. And he goes back to Carl Jung and says, dude, what the heck? It was a year. You're the second most famous psychiatrist in the world. Like, this was expensive. What the heck? I drank again? And Carl Jung had the humility to say, I misdiagnosed you. You're an alcoholic. And I've never seen anyone recover where your state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. The only hope that somebody like you can have is what's known as a spiritual awakening. And so that becomes our solution, a spiritual awakening. And Roland Hazard's like, cool, I hang out at church. That should be no problem. Carl Jung is like, dude, not cool. Not cool at all. You can't hang out in a church pew and hope this thing happens for you. You've got to go out and find it. You've got to seek. And so Roland Hazard, knowing that if he doesn't have a spiritual awakening, he's going to die of this thing, he gets involved with what was known as the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group, they had nothing to do with alcoholism. They had everything to do with having a deeper experience of the God of their understanding. And what they had was a series of actions that any human being could take to have that deeper experience of God. And our guy Roland Hazard, he's like, oh, I need one of those. So he gets involved with the Oxford Group, and the series of actions that they had later became our 12 steps. And so in that moment, Roland Hazard knows what the solution is, a spiritual awakening. And he knows how to get that spiritual awakening, which is to work these, what we have today, these 12 steps. And as a result, he stays sober. And he goes, and I won't share the whole story because I'll try to keep us on track, but he carries that message of the solution and the program of action to this handsome fella by the name of Ebby Thacher. And Ebby Thacher, he was on trial for some shenanigans, as we're wont to do. And he had, again, maybe not the best motives, trying to avoid a 6 months jail sentence. He works the steps, and he has a spiritual awakening. And he goes and he carries that message of the solution, a spiritual awakening, and the program of action, what later became our 12 steps, to Bill Wilson. And Bill Wilson, he's sitting in his kitchen table, he's drinking. Ebby Thacher shows up and carries that message. And in that moment, Bill Wilson has the 3 pieces of information that any of us, all of us, need to know in order to achieve that sobriety. He knows what his problem is. And he got that from Dr. Silkworth, who explained the physical allergy. He explained the mental obsession. He knows that the solution that he needs is a spiritual awakening or spiritual experience. And he knows how to get it, the program of action. And so he checks himself into the Towns Hospital for the 3rd time. And he works the steps. They weren't laid out quite as they are today, but essentially, just to keep it simple, he works the steps and has a spiritual awakening. And so that brings us back to the book. Hope we had fun on that tangent. I know I did. You guys don't have to have fun on the tangents, but it's more fun if we do. All right, so it says, as part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. What are we talking about there? Well, what we're talking about is Bill Wilson's 12-step work. As part of Bill Wilson staying well, his rehabilitation, he carried this message to others, impressing upon them, telling them it is important that they continue to work with others. Goodness, we haven't even begun to describe the allergy in this chapter. But already we're hammering home that if I want permanent sobriety, I've got to work with others. Darn it, it's not optional. I got to do this thing. And it says, this has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. And kind of an interesting thing. Oh, we're on page XXV. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. And first page of the doctor's opinion, because I went on a history tangent. Don't worry, we'll pick up the pace. Well, we might not. I won't make promises I can't keep. All right. But I am glad you're here. So it says, the rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. And in the very, very early days, this way of life, these 12 steps as a way of life, was also offered to family members. And that's a theme that we're going to pick up, not for a little while, but we're going to pick it up in the chapter Into Action. And we're going to see that be picked up again in the chapter Working with Others, and definitely in the Forgotten chapters. And it's one of those things, if there is somebody that I am close to, that I want to help, but maybe I'm too close to, or maybe they're not open to hearing it from me, the best thing that I can do is have a vibrant program. That's the best thing I can do. Live this way of life in such a way where they can't deny the change that has happened to me. And it says, this man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. Recovered. There's that word, recovered. Now, that doesn't mean cured, for those that are maybe new. Yeah, it's apparently this is the 6th time we've said recover. I didn't do the counting, so if it's wrong, I don't mind if you blame me if it's wrong. But recovered. Recovered does not mean cured, but what recovered means is the mental obsession has lifted. And it happens as the result of this course of action, that I get to live in a position of neutrality. And man, that is what's on offer. Not I have to stay away from slippery places. No, but I get to live in a position of neutrality, recovered. And then it says, I personally know scores of cases who are of the type with whom other methods have failed completely. And that's an important line. And I find that line, that sentence, really helpful in sort of diagnosing myself. Now we're going to get to some of the diagnostic criteria, but I can ask myself, have I tried other methods to get and stayed sober? And have they worked? And I'll be honest, if you're hanging out with me on a Monday night, Tuesday morning, if you're, in Thailand, it probably not. There's probably other things that you could be doing. You know what I'm saying? And I talk about how, I didn't try everything that there was to try, but everything that I tried failed. Everything that I tried failed. I just could not find that permanent, contented sobriety. And that was my experience. So if I am one of those people whom other methods have failed completely, I might have this illness. And double I might need to do this thing. Which, by the way, there's so much freedom and so much joy in this way of life. It's not actually an but it feels like it when we get here. And it says, these facts appear to be of extreme medical importance because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth. And what I want to say about rapid growth is it's implying that it does not take long to get well. At this time, when the letter is being written, it's one alcoholic helping another alcoholic, one person working with another. Rapid growth doesn't take long to get well. It does not take long to have a spiritual experience. I say this a lot, but I think it's important. It does not take long if I'm new. It does not take long if I've been in and out and relapsing and struggling and hurting, it does not take long. But also, if I've been around this thing for a while and the magic is gone, it does not take long to get well. So rapid growth. So because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group, they may mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism. And that's a word that I got to say carefully. And so an epoch is an era of time. And annals, said it right, is recorded history. So it's saying like in this new era in recorded history. And that's one way to look at it. But I kind of have a brain that works with metaphors. So if you have a brain that works with metaphors, we're going to have a good time. You guys know the movie A Beauty and the Beast, or The Beauty and the Beast? You know that one? It doesn't matter if it's the cartoon or the live action. You guys remember that movie? And in that movie, Beast had that library, that beautiful library, and it was filled floor to ceiling with books. Now imagine the Beast had a particular sort of reading interest, and imagine that every single book was about alcoholism. And every single book on every single page, it was saying that alcoholics were hopeless. There was no hope. It was hopeless, 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 hopeless. And what he's saying is that in that library right now is a new book with a brand new page that says there might be hope for people with this illness. That's what he's saying. I just like to imagine things. And it says, these men may well have a remedy for thousands of such situations. You may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. You know what's interesting about that is, Dr. William D. Silkworth, he was saying that about the recovered members, but I really believe he's saying that about us. You can rely absolutely on anything that a recovered member says about themselves. And like, that's the power, or the belief that he has in the power of this program. He's long passed away. Would never know somebody like me. But to have that faith and belief that you can rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. He doesn't say lend them money, but he says you can rely on that. Yeah. Oh, and if you're interested in reading more about recovered, not cured, you can see that in the chat. Absolutely. And it says, very truly yours, William D. Silkworth, MD. And in the first edition of the book, it didn't say very truly yours, William D. Silkworth, MD. It said XX, MD. And in the very first printings, the doctor's opinion was on page 1. And a lot of, I'm sure maybe not, but I know that there's kind of that question, like the doctor's opinion, it's such an important chapter. It's laying down this foundation of step 1, kicking us off into step 1. There's so much information there. Why would it be tucked away in the Roman numerals that we don't want to read? Like, why did that happen? Well, Rob pointed out that this happened after he died. But after William D. Silkworth passed away, his name was added to the doctor's opinion. But in literary, in the literary world, like in the world of books, if you have contributed anything to the numbered pages of a book, you would be considered an author of that book. And so if they had kept him on page 1, he'd have to be considered an author. So it got moved down to our fun little Roman numerals. So that's my fun fact about why the doctor's opinion is in Roman numerals. Exciting. And it says, and so now in between the two statements, the alcoholics interject. And I say, because don't we always? We just can't let somebody else have the last word. We always got to throw our 2 cents in. And I'm joking, because we do have to contextually sort of tie the two statements together. So it says, the physician who, at our request, gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. So we're going to see this statement here in a little bit. In this statement, He confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. And so what we're starting to get into is the description of the physical allergy, that as an alcoholic or an addict or whatever brings you to the study today, there is something physiologically different about how somebody like me responds to and processes alcohol. That's what we're beginning to talk about. And it says, it did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking. Now, in this book, anytime we talk about control or lack of control, really, what we're talking about there is the physical allergy. So it did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were full flight from reality, or we're outright mental defectives. I know of a group called Outright Mental Defectives. And here's what it says. These things were true to some extent. In fact, to a considerable extent with some of us. I'm just pointing the fingers at me. But we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. So what we're trying to open up to is the idea that this illness is not one of a moral. It's not about being immoral. It's not about being wrong. It's not about being broken. It's not about being bad. It's not about being mentally defective or just a sickened. It's what it is about. Oh, we're on page XXVI. And we're just first full paragraph. What we're trying to say is on a physiological level, there is something different about how we respond to alcohol. Different. And we're going to hold on to that word different. Not bad, not wrong, not anything like that. Different. And it says, in our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. So if we're having a conversation about alcoholism and we're not talking about the physical allergy, we don't have the full scope of this thing. We need to understand the physical allergy. And it says the doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. So we're on page XVI, and it's if you go find the bottom paragraph, just go one up. That'll be easier to find. And yeah, an allergy in 1930s medical dictionary too. And what is mine? Mine is the American Pocket Medical Dictionary, the 15th edition. Yeah, I know it's from what, 1934. And did I get this because I have an interest in this thing? Nope, I just had it around the house because that's the sort of human being I am, a nerdy weirdo. And an allergy, as kind of defined in that era, is that hypersensitivity. It's this abnormal physical or sensitive reaction. And as Rob put in the chat, allergy, Stedman's Medical Dictionary defines allergy as a hypersensitivity of the body cells to a specific substance that results in various types of reactions. Now, what we're going to point out is it doesn't say good reactions. It doesn't say bad reactions. It doesn't say ones I have opinions on. It says various, and in the idea of different. And so what we're talking about there, because I don't know about you, when I got here, I got tripped up with this whole idea of an allergy. And of course we make the joke, yes, I'm allergic. I break out in cuffs, the handcuffs, break out in cruisers, back to the police cars, break out in spots, like Lethbridge or other people's beds, break out in those. But allergy, what are we talking about? And when we lens in just that it is a physical reaction that happens to me that does not happen to other people, that helps us get a sense of what we're talking about. And it says, as laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may, of course, mean little. So I'm not a doctor. It turns out an allergy specialist would be an immunologist. I'm not an immunologist. I'm definitely not educated, despite having that outdated pocket dictionary. You know what I mean? I'm no doctor. Although I did write my own prescriptions for a while. So we're not men of medicine or men of science. So our opinion as to this theory that the doctor says we have an allergy may not mean, it may mean little, it may not carry weight. But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we could not otherwise account. That idea that how I respond to alcohol is different than other people. By the way, if you're wondering, what is a normal response to alcohol? We'll just do a little compare and contrast. A normal response to alcohol is to go out and have, I like to describe it as like, honey, I'm going to go out for 3 drinks. I'll be home by 9. And do you know what they do? They go out and they have 3 drinks. And then they're home by 9 with both their shoes. And their pants are dry. And they find the right person's bed. You know, they're with the person they're supposed to be with. You know what I mean? That is a normal reaction, but abnormal. An allergy is just this abnormal reaction. And it's this idea that like, hey, what happens to me when I start to drink? And we're going to get into it. And well, you know what? Maybe we'll get into it right now because I'm off on this tangent. But yeah, tangent. Woo! And I was going to cover it anyways. We just covered it a little early. No problem. I'm efficient. That's not true. But like, what does that look like for me? My reaction to alcohol is I take a drink and, oh man, I need more. And the more that I drink, the thirstier I get, and the more that I need to drink. And when that was explained to me, there was a like little ding. Oh, that's why once I started, I couldn't stop. That's why I couldn't control it. And that's why at the end of the night, when other people were going to bed, I was playing a little game known as cigarette butt roulette. If you're wondering about whether you got the allergy to alcohol, you can ask yourself if you've ever played the game cigarette butt roulette. That is where the people at the party have gone to bed or passed out or, you know, coupled up and made their different life decisions. And you're going around finishing off people's bottom beers, trying to avoid the one with the cigarette butts. Now, here's what I'll say. If you finished off the one with the cigarette butts, there's no doubt about it, you got the allergy. I didn't, but there's no debate, you know? And so only people who have this inability to control the amount they take are drinking in that way. And so let's just have a look at, and when we talk about allergy, and so some of you might be familiar with Joe and Charlie and some of that strawberry milk alcohol. And so an allergy is just, for our purposes, an abnormal physical reaction. So let's say I had an allergy to strawberries. My body would process strawberries in a different way. It's not because I'm immoral. It's not because I'm a fallen woman. It is not because I'm inherently bad. Now, those things could be true, but that's not why I couldn't have strawberries, right? And when we talk about abnormal, again, abnormal doesn't mean good or bad or anything like that. 9 out of 10 people in the world have strawberries and they get absolutely no reaction. That's my experience. I have strawberries, nothing happens. But if I was allergic to strawberries and I ingest or consume strawberries, my allergy to strawberries manifests itself in the phenomenon of a rash or a hive. And safe to say that that's a negative effect. I don't like a rash. I don't like hives. I don't want to be itchy. I don't want to be uncomfortable. And is it safe to say that my allergy to strawberries only manifests itself when I've eaten strawberries? I'm not going to get a rash or I'm not going to get hives if I see that strawberries are on sale and I clip out a coupon out of the newsletter or whatever. It's not going to happen if we're hanging out and you're having a delightful bowl of strawberries. I'm not going to get an allergic reaction. If I'm hanging out with my niece and my nephew and they're watching an episode of Strawberry Shortcake, they're both too old for that now, but if they were watching an episode of Strawberry Shortcake, I'm not going to get a rash. I only develop a rash when I ingest the allergen. Now, so that reaction only happens when I consume the allergen. Now, if I have a little bit of strawberries and I'm allergic, I'm going to get a bit of a rash. But let's say I go to town and I have a whole bushel of strawberries. We're going hard. We're eating all the strawberries, a whole basket full of them. I'm going to have a big rash, a bigger reaction, a bigger hives. And again, that's a negative reaction. It doesn't feel good. Now, let's say I was lactose intolerant and I'm allergic to milk and milk products. Again, it's not because I'm a bad person or I'm immoral or, I'm a shifty character. No, it's just my body does not process milk or milk products in the way that most people do. Most people in the world can have milk, although there's areas in the world where that percentage is a little bit different, right? And so the allergy to milk manifests itself, and I'm just going to be real polite and say an upset stomach. And so if I have some milk, my allergy to milk would manifest itself as an upset stomach. And that is a negative reaction. Now, if I'm watching TV or I'm watching a video and they have a commercial for like cereal and they pour the milk into the bowl slowly, I'm not going to get an upset stomach at that. That's not going to, upset my tummy. If we're out in Calgary, there's a place called Peter's Drive-In and they're well known for their milkshakes. Let's say we're driving by Peter's, or heck, you come visit Calgary, come see us, and we go to Peter's, and you guys have a milkshake. That my allergy isn't going to set off. My allergy only sets off when I ingest the milk or the milk products. And again, safe to say, the upset stomach is a negative reaction. And so I'm an alcoholic. I have an allergy to alcohol. Like similarly, it's not because I'm bad. It's not because I'm immoral. It is because the way in which my body processes alcohol just happens to be different than non-alcoholics. And so my allergy to alcohol, what it manifests itself in is what is known as the phenomenon of craving. That idea that I need more. And so with my milk, I might put a little bit of, coffee, cream in my coffee or milk in my tea. I'll get a little bit of a reaction. Now, if I chug a whole 2-liter or 4-gallon thing of milk, I'm going to have a big reaction. And it's just like that with alcohol. See, the more that I drink, the stronger that phenomenon of craving gets, the bigger the reaction. And also with the phenomenon of craving, it only happens when I ingest alcohol. So if I'm hanging out with some people and we're out for dinner and they're drinking, having a glass of wine, having some beer, that's not going to trigger or set off my physical allergy. If there's a Super Bowl commercial and they got this, pour the beer slowly into the glass and it bubbles and it creates that little foam head, that's not going to set off the physical allergy. I might get a strong desire to drink, but what's kicking off there is the mental obsession. It's important to understand that the physical allergy only sets off once I have ingested the alcohol, or for those that are here with different substances, consumed the substance or substances that I have that allergic response to. Now, again, sometimes we're like, hey, no, it's not an allergy. I don't get a rash or I don't get hives. But here's what trips us up. Hives, rash, upset stomach, all of that is a negative reaction. But the initial effect of alcohol on my system is not a negative reaction. In fact, the initial effect of alcohol on my system, the initial phenomenon of craving, it is the most incredibly positive thing that I have ever experienced. It is that, it is that peace, that relief, that ease, that comfort, that, I can fit and I can be okay in my own skin. That's what we're talking about. But that is still abnormal. See, that person that's going out to the bar, honey, I'll have 3 drinks and be home by 9. They don't drink and get a solution for life. So they don't have the phenomenon of craving, but they also don't experience that, ease and comfort that I experience. And I'll stop the share. And one of the things, I'm just going to throw it out there. I have a metaphor, and it is a helpful metaphor, but it is not an appropriate metaphor. So I'm just going to preface this with it is a little inappropriate, the metaphor that I'm going to share. So if you're offended, just give me about 30 seconds. All right. Let's say, I know, like 30 seconds. I'll try to be quick. I'm taking too long. Okay. Let's say I'm allergic to seafood. That's probably an abnormal reaction. I'm not actually allergic to seafood. I can have seafood. 9 out of 10 people in the world can have seafood. That's no problem. Bear with me. This is where it gets appropriate. Let's say my allergy to seafood manifests itself as the phenomenon of an orgasm. Is it safe to say that would be abnormal? Right? And is it safe to say you'd probably have a hard time keeping me away from the Red Lobster, right? And that's kind of the metaphor. We're like, no, it's not an allergy. It's about as weird as that situation. Okay, for those that were not listening, you can come back now. I don't know how they'd be able to hear me, and I didn't time this thing. Ugh. Anywho, so that's kind of what it is. It's this abnormal physical reaction. And so when we go back to the reading, page XXVI, when it says, our opinion as to its soundness may, of course, mean little, but as ex-brom drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we could not otherwise account. It explained that when I said I only want to go out for 3 drinks, I couldn't. It explains that, like, once I started going, I was off. And it explains the bottom beer roulette, and it explains, why I couldn't drink like a lady, why I couldn't get it together. Yeah, Scott in the chat says, I didn't know how bad I felt until alcohol made me feel so good. Absolutely. Yeah, it was my solution. It was my ease. It was my comfort. It was, yeah, absolutely. And so it says, though we work out our solution, again, the solution being the spiritual awakening on the spiritual awakening, as well as altruistic plane. And Rob put in the chat, altruism, helping other people, showing concern, welfare for others. I like to talk about altruism as helping other people for fun and for free. I got to do it before it gets fun, though. And it's definitely got to be free for it to be fun. But it's that helping other people because it's the right thing to do. So what's our solution? We have a spiritual awakening. How do I continue to hold on to that spiritual awakening? I go work with others. Again, what we're talking about, that altruistic plane, we're talking about 12-step work. Heck, we haven't even gotten to the second letter, which is maybe not a letter, but we haven't even got there yet. So it says more often, though we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as altruistic plane, we favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. More often than not, it is imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached, as he has a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. And what he's talking about there is oftentimes alcoholics need to be detoxed and have the alcohol or whatever's bringing you to the study out of your system before we can accept what's on offer. And that's a line that for me has begun to speak in my life, that I needed complete abstinence. See, I couldn't, just not drink and smoke crack like a lady. I know that maybe some of you can. I can't, and I need complete abstinence. So I needed that, like to have that mind altering stuff out of my system so that I could accept what was on offer. And it says, the doctor writes, he says, the subject presented it to me in this book seems to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with alcoholic addiction. So paramount is of the utmost, like the top of the mountain, like the most important for those who suffer from this illness. And he says, I say this after many years' experience as medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country, treating alcoholic and drug addiction. And again, so what he's doing is he's appealing to authority. He's an expert. He's really done this work to the best of his ability, working with others, tried to help others. Something like 50,000 different alcoholics, different drug addicts. He's coming from a place of experience. There was therefore a real sense of satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on a subject which is covered in such masterly detail in these pages. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. What with our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. When I first read that, I'm like, what the heck are you talking about, Silkworth? Like, what are you on about? That makes no sense. And so what he's saying is that for a long time, doctors realized that alcoholics needed some sort of spiritual answer. That's what it's pointing to with moral psychology. Now, the second time we're going to see moral psychology in this chapter, we're only going to see it twice in this book, but the second time we see it, it is pointing very specifically to the 12 steps to have a spiritual awakening. And so what he's saying is, like, we doctors realized y'all needed some sort of spirituality. And when it says, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception, he's like, I didn't know how to give you God. I didn't know how to give you a spiritual awakening. I didn't know how to get you connected. And it says, what with our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything? He's saying, I'm meta-science, I'm meta-medicine. I can't write a prescription, although there is Dr. Bob's prescription, which is trust God, clean house, help others. But Dr. Silkworth couldn't write, a prescription. He's like, I don't know how to give this thing to you. I'm sorry, there's the largest fly that I've ever seen, and he's very interested in what's going on, which is delightful. He's a chunky boy flying around. So what he's saying is, like, I don't know how to give you spirituality. And in many ways, I think what we're trying to avoid saying is God. He's trying to avoid saying spirituality. And so that's when he says we're not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. I'm like, oh, sneaky guy, stuck in an O, Absolutely. Yeah, there are many fellowships that adopted the 12 steps, and this being an all-inclusive study, not affiliated with any of them, everyone's welcome to come and listen and have this experience. And moral psychology is the branch of philosophy that can, oh man, I should have pre-read before. Contemplates. Why do I struggle with, you can tell my brain's starting, I'm like, contemplate. My brain can't contemplate the word contemplate. Contemplates what is right and wrong. It explores the nature of morality and examines how people should live their lives in relation to others. So those big questions. And in this context, I really feel like it's pointing to that spirituality, like they needed that spiritual answer, but we couldn't give it to them. And it says, many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital. We're talking about Bill again. If anyone's wondering, we're talking about Bill. This is just Bill. Bill Dubs. One of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital, and while here, he acquired some ideas, which he put into practical application at once. And I won't break down the whole history again, but what are those practical ideas? Our problem, which is a physical allergy and a mental obsession. Our solution, which is a spiritual awakening. And our program of action, which today is our 12 steps. Those were these ideas which he put into practical application at once. That means at once he worked the steps. At once he did the thing. That's what we're talking about. So don't sit, don't wait, dive in, let's do it. And it says later he requested the privilege. And it's a reminder for somebody like me, I ought to treat sponsorship and working with others like a privilege. Because for somebody like me, it is. Later he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here. And with some misgiving, we consented. I just love that. Because, he was like, hey, can I work with others? And Dr. Silk was like, oh, man, okay. You can work with the real hopeless ones. Like, I won't let you spend too much time with, the ones that we got a good shot with. you can work with the hopeless ones. And then what we're going to see is the results of this work speak for themselves. He goes on with, he had misgivings. He wasn't sure if this was a good idea. But the cases we have followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. They believe in themselves and still more in the capital P, power, which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. See, I don't do it. That capital P power does. I talk about it. I take some actions that I don't want to take and that maybe I don't think will help me, but God does the heavy lifting, the God of my own understanding that I didn't understand, I didn't like when I got here. And what I can see there is another sneaky description of what a spiritual awakening looks like. To show up with this absence of profit motive. They're helping other people, that altruism, just to help, not what can I get? That community spirit, that working together. And that believe in themselves, yeah, that's what it looks like. Man, it looks like self-confidence. But for those of us who have recovered, we know it's a confidence and a power greater than ourselves. And so a beautiful, sneaky little description of the spiritual awakening. I love finding those. And I'll, as we go through, I'll be like, we're not going to the spiritual experience appendix at the back. No, we're not doing that. We will. I promise we'll get there. But it's one of my things. I like to pretend that we're never going to get there. We will. So it says, of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor. So what we're talking about there is separated from the physical allergy. Whenever in this book we're talking about the word craving, again, like lack of control, we're talking about the physical allergy. And it says this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be of maximum benefit. So oftentimes, we need to be physically detoxed and separated before we're able to accept the program that's on offer. And again, for somebody like me, I need to have that complete abstinence. And so now we're diving in, lensing in again to the physical allergy. It says, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is the manifestation of an allergy. Again, very simply, an abnormal physical reaction. And the phenomenon of craving, that thing that sets off in me that tells me I need more, that is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. That means normal people never experience the allergy. Never. Now, they might go out and get drunk intentionally. They might go out and they might, when they're young, finding their limits. I hear that's a thing that people do. They find their limits. I don't relate to that at all. Limits, where are you? It's unconsciousness, turns out, is my limit. So they're out there finding their limits, but they don't experience that thing where I take that drink and the drink takes me and I need more, and then I need more, and then I need more. And it says these allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Those problems pile up and pile up and pile up as a result of the inability to control the amount that I drink once I start. And, just where we're at with time and where we're at, that's maybe a good place to leave it. So I'll stop the recording and we'll wrap up with a prayer. And thank you guys all for being here.